Hello and welcome to the next episode of Sound Design Here Create. This is Project 4, Pine's Fog, Episode 2, Foliage and Breath. So first, what is Sound Design Here Create? It is a sound design focused series where we undertake a set of projects, each made of a piece of media, such as this image and corresponding video of a forest, and a piece of prompt text. In this case, here is a forest. Create music inspired by the fog. You may notice also a sticker up in the corner, 2 artists, 1 prompt. I'll explain what this is. I am working together on this project with YouTuber Odo Zendaidokai. I have a link to their channel in the description, and what we're doing is working in parallel on this project and coming up with our own sounds. At the end of the process, I'm going to watch what they did, they're going to watch what I did, we're going to react, and we're going to watch the entire series that each one of us have produced to see what we have to learn, what we would have done differently, what we did the same, and hopefully come out a little enriched. So what I've done so far for this project is last episode we came up with a few ideas. I used some presets in Bitwig on synths to come up with some sounds just to give us an idea of, does this really work? Does the concept work? And I think that it did. The sound design is going to be broken into 2 parts. One of those are sample-based and one of those are synthesis-based. Today we're going to do the sample-based sounds. So first we're going to watch a little montage of me collecting those samples. So here I am trampling on some leaves. I mentioned that for the foliage at the upper level of the trees, the leaves that are there, I wanted to have a sound that was maybe brighter and reflected that. So I'm going to use, hopefully, those leaf sounds. For the ground, I was thinking there's sort of moss and twigs. So what I've done is I've tried to record myself, in this case, walking through the grass. Later on, you'll see me walking or poking some other grass. Here's another leafy ground that I walked over. I'm not sure whether I'll use this or the other more intense crunching leaves. But in any case, I think it seems like a reasonable concept. Moving on, more leaves, more crunching. And I think you can hear this is a bit more sparse, but a slightly different texture. So I haven't decided exactly which way I'm going to go. I think possibly I didn't include all the sounds in this montage. Here's the other brushing the grass backwards and forwards that I mentioned. So I think this has an interesting sound, an interesting texture. Obviously I was recording with my actual audio recorder and I won't just be using the audio from this video. So let's have a quick look at the video that we're using as a prompt. Now, I mentioned that I would potentially like to get a sound that reflected the person filming this walking through the scene, even though I think it's possibly a drone. So the way that I wanted to do that is possibly have some breathing sounds, have some footstep sounds. So the samples that I've got today, I'm going to be trying to make that footstep sound of the person recording this. That's going to sit in the background because this is a more musical project. And also I'm probably going to use some breath sounds, which are going to, again, sit in the background. They're just a textural element to add a little extra interest. I'm also going to be trying to build up some sort of pad sound in the bass, reflecting the mossy ground. And as I mentioned, the leaf samples that I've got, I'm hopefully going to turn into something probably granular texture, reflecting the leaves, which will play at higher pitch. And then next episode, we're going to be filling in the spaces that are left there by the most important sound being the fog, and then the other sound which will punctuate this piece, which is the trees. As last time, I have the Ableton Push 1 in front of me, which I'm using alongside Bitwig, thanks to Driven by Moss. So let's first just listen to the sounds that I've got here. All I've done is loaded the samples in. They're not stretched. They're all set to raw presently, so they're at their sort of native lengths. And I should probably actually set, yeah, maybe afterwards I'll actually set a tempo here correctly in case I need to stretch them. But first let's listen. This one is not included in the video. This is me walking over some chipped wood in a park. So let's listen to that. So I really like the crunch that it's got, and I think this may be the one that I use for the sound of the person filming walking through the scene. It's unfortunately a relatively short loop. I've set the tempo such that one bar is 1 second. So I know that the entire video we're working with is about 70 seconds, so I have a timeline set here. So we've only got about 10 seconds of that, but I think it should be okay to loop it because it's going to be in the background. So I think I'm happy with that. The next thing, let's listen to this grass sound. So let me pull that up. I'm thinking this might be suitable for the pad that I mentioned, for the bass pad, the mossy sound. And I think that sounds reasonable. I think we've got some texture there, but possibly also one of these other sounds, which are some like bushy plants that I was pushing my foot through. Let's listen. So they sound quite scratchy and high-pitched, but I'm imagining possibly filtering those down and getting something that I'm more happy with. There's a car driving past there, so I'll probably just get rid of this one because I'm not going to really want to filter that out because that lives in the bass area, so I've just removed that. Some more leaf sounds. So these leaf sounds, I could definitely see turning that into something a little grainy, so I think that works for me. Let's listen to flower bed leaves. These sounds, by the way, I've kind of trimmed them, I've normalized them, and some of them I've done some compression because they had some peaks that I didn't want, but basically they are, it's not fair to say that they're what came out of the audio recorder, but they're not significantly processed beyond trying to get the levels sounding right. So this has another interesting footstep sound, reminds me a bit of this wood chip. So maybe what I'll do is I'll group these, and then the group, I can name these footsteps. And then I think the one called breath is just going to be breath. Let's listen to it now. Obviously that's very exaggerated breathing, but I think that's going to work here because again, this is going to be looping in the background. So these ones were the grass. I think these were going to, let me group those, these are going to form a part of the, I'll call it the moss pad. That slash. So I think that sounds pretty good. And we've got these two different leaf samples, so let's listen to the second one. Compare. Try again. So I think I prefer these, but I may as well, it's probably not worth grabbing both because I'm looking to do something like, I'm going to load this into a sampler and do some sort of granular process. So I'm just going to commit and go for the concrete leaves. So let's first see what we can do with these footstep samples. So this wood chip one, I'm going to move it back to stretch, and I'm going to specify the base tempo to be 240 BPM. So that's just going to mean that it's not being stretched, and now I can stretch it from here. Definitely I feel like I'm walking too quickly for this purposes, so let's stretch this out a bit. Try one of the other stretch algorithms. I think Slice HD works. Let me try bigger grains. Given that this is in the background, I probably shouldn't worry too much. I've maybe overstretched that a little. So let's pull it back. That's working okay. So I'm going to try and just loop this and see how the loop sounds. It's not necessarily obvious how well these things will always loop, so I should probably zoom out. Let's pull that all the way out there, and let's listen across the loop points. I think that's fine. Let's listen to these flower bed leaves again. I think I'm just going to ditch them. Because this is a background sound element, I'm not too worried about exactly getting like a very refined timbre here. I'm probably just going to band pass out what I think sounds like what I want. Oops, let me settle that. Okay, so those are the footsteps. And maybe what I'll do is I will rename this to camera, and then I can rename this to footsteps. Remember, in the background, I'm probably, when I do the mix, going to do something maybe a little more refined to this. And since this is now the camera recording, I'm going to try and bring this breath sound in. So this will be in one group. Not that I need it grouped particularly. So I think I'm going to pull some of the start of this out. That needs a bit of a fade. So I won't have the next inhale included in this loop. Let's just play that again. I have a bit of background noise in there, but I think I'm just gonna deal with that because I'm gonna be filtering again background sound. So let's go for another granular stretch, and let's stretch this out. How far? Maybe like this. Now let's try a spectral one. Maybe overstretched again, so let's pull it down a bit. So I think by the time I filter it, some of those stretching artifacts are going to disappear, so I'm not going to worry too much about it. Let's pull the loop out. Again, I've got to tell myself this is a background element. It's a background element, so I shouldn't worry about it too much. As with the other one, I'm going to throw a filter on this. And I'm going to solo this group. Okay, so I think that works well enough for these purposes. In practice, I may put some more processing on the group or on the individual sounds, but for now, I can imagine that being the sound of the person on the camera in the background. So now we have this moss pad. And what I wanted to do with this was I wanted to take these into a sampler so as they could be played. I don't necessarily need them to be pitched exactly, but I want them to be able to change their pitch, and I want to control that timbre a bit. So let's add an instrument track, and that instrument can be a sampler. I'm going to drag this in, into the sampler. We have this I think that should be fine. So now I need to decide how I'm going to process this. First, let me detect the root key. I don't know if it's going to do anything because it's a pretty noisy sample. So that sounds reasonable. And instead of repitch, I'm going to do textures here. So now I have the capacity to adjust the speed in which I proceed through. And the size of the grains that I'm using. And I have the capacity to add various other modulations. So this sounds reasonable, but what I would like to do is add some variation, and I'd add some sort of stacking here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on a voice stack. I don't need anywhere near that number of voices. Let's say I'm going to have 4 voices, and I've got a 5-way voice stack. So that's going to mean that there are multiple instances of this running in parallel, this sound, and each one I can modulate separately. So I can bring a voice stack modulator in, and this voice stack modulator will allow me to set parameters corresponding to the different voices. So you can see by default the modulation range is plus to minus 1. So the first thing that I might like to do, for example, is route this to hand position. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to have one instance each of this sound spread across the stereo spectrum. Also, I don't really want all of these to sound like they're starting coincident with one another. So what I'll do then is this start point, I might like to provide some sort of modulation, or the position here. So I have this play offset position. So hopefully you can see the multiple playheads now moving across here. You can also even adjust these loop and length parameters. So this should mean that the multiple playhead instances are going to, you may notice that they sort of bounce at different points. Next thing I'm going to need is a filter. So let's stop that and have a tracking filter. So one of the things you may notice is the velocity sensitivity. I'm going to turn this all the way down. Because the velocity sensitivity isn't really relevant for what I'm doing. Now, let's add some attack. So I'm adjusting the size of the grains. So this is breaking the sound into smaller parts. So this is a sort of base pad. I think this is getting somewhere. These out a little bit. Pulled those away because I had 5 instances, but there was no negative modulation possibility. Okay, so now this reminds me of a sort of, I don't know, pulsing, moving earth, which I'm liking. I think it's going to need some. It's going to need something to blur it out a little bit, but I'm not going to spend too long on this. I might try adding a blur just to give it some stereo motion. I'll include it in the effects chain. One of the reasons to put things in the effects chain is anything in the effect chain for this device can be affected by modulators if I would like to do that. So that's just FYI. I'm just going to use this stereoizer. Let's keep those low. Oops. Okay, so I think this is working for us. I'm going to move this out of the group. Actually, I'll leave it in the group. But what I'll do is I will mute those other parts. Actually, I didn't use this one, so I'm just going to delete this one. So this is this mossy pad, and what I'll do also is add a MIDI clip here. And the MIDI clip, in fact, I won't add a MIDI clip, I will record a MIDI clip. I think that should work. I'm just gonna trim this down to be, actually, let me just quantize that. Let's just line this all up a little. Just bring this all the way back to the 1, just for convenience sake, and that can run all the way to the 9. This one can run all the way to the 17. And then I can loop this. So this will give us this repeating texture, just so when we're listening back, we've got something to look at. And now for the final element, which is going to be another sampler, which is the granular texture for the leaves. So let me add a sampler here, and let's pull this into the sampler. Let's just play it. Not sure if it'll detect much of a root pitch, but I may follow a similar pattern here. Probably again, just 4 notes of polyphony is fine. Let's add a voice stack. And for the voice stack, I'm going to be using, I think granular is good again. I will put this in a little bit. A loop. So loop points. The exact points of these loop, that doesn't really matter too much for our purposes, but I'm going to go for it in any case. So let's try. So you can see we have the 5 playheads running through. They're probably not far enough apart for what we want to do here, so let's bring that much further. Let's bring that up, back. So you see how far apart the playheads are here. So motion means how far are the actual grains taken from the playhead. Okay, I think this leapy sound is going to work for us. I might do the same trick that I did before of panning these out. So definitely a lot of space now. And finally I'm going to filter them. I'll bandpass them again. I'll use key tracking. And I think I'm just going to have a single MIDI note here. So that should be fine. And I'll just stretch that out to the full length of this. Be okay. So I can mute this. I guess it was never in a group anyway. Let me have a look at that. It's not, notes actually not starting at the very beginning. So let's pull it back. Let's play. So I think I'm going to need a way of bringing some pitch back to this pad texture that I've got. I think at the moment it's maybe a little bit too far on the atonal side. So I'm probably going to layer that with a synth sound, and I'm probably also going to layer the moss pad with a synth sound. But let's just go back and watch the video, and let's listen to how it sounds to us. Okay, so I think that's working. I think that sounds very busy at the moment, and I think we're definitely going to have to do some work when we come back to the mix, and there'll be some more sound design refinements required to make that all feel a bit more musical. But I think we have the elements there. The core is in place. So just to remind everyone, this is a collaboration with YouTuber Odo Zendaidokai, so please check out what they're doing and their parallel sound design series to this. But in any case, I'd like to say thank you very much for watching today, and goodbye.